のプリキュアって夢がある。
Amane, I think you just got served, and not in a good way.
Continuing right where we left off from last week, Amane invited our heroines back into her family shop, and as usual, there was a lot of food prawn, but also a very emo little purple head. Granted, she did go into her reasoning behind turning down becoming a cure, which of course was because of her time as gentle, which even Yui was able to point out was a little ridiculous, as she clearly wasn't in control of her body, but yet, for her, that still didn't erase the sins that were committed with her body.
Well, alright, I mean, that's kind of standard reasoning for a face-turn character to refuse to call it first, but here's one thing I have to ask. How did you end up in the bundles in the first place?
Nobody knows.
Yeah, I know I keep bringing this up, but we still don't know much about the backstory of this character, and therefore don't really have a baseline to measure stuff like her level of guilt. Key among them, how she ended up joining the bundles, which, depending on the answer, would decide how much of Gentle's actions were indeed Amane's fault. I mean, let's compare with, say, Toa. We know that she willingly went to despair, which led to the creation of Twilight and the downfall of her kingdom. Child or not, that still does put a lot of blame on her, even before taking on her dark persona. And while Siren was forcibly corrupted, a lot of that was implied to be based on her envy towards Humi. Here, at least for now, Yui's totally right that there's nothing that she really needs to be blamed for. And indeed, if she does feel guilt, then she really should be making amends by becoming a Precure.
Granted, I certainly don't know what their plans are for this character, but at the same time, these are questions that I think do need to be addressed to get us really invested in her.
Really, this just kind of shows how backwards a lot of the writing of the series is, as right after she left the table, we got some character building from her brothers as they described her general personality traits, like her being a stoic hard worker who doesn't want others to worry about her. Honestly, not bad stuff, but
once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
Or at least a few episodes ago, which would have made the last episode with the vice principal mean a little more as we'd really understand why she didn't want Amane to quit. It's an unfortunate issue with a series like this that generally tries to be slower paced with storytelling, but then has to rapidly speed up when tackling more serious conflicts, and as a result, not giving it the gravitas it needs. But anyway, since Nishiki Itoka was the animation director this week, it honestly makes absolute sense to make most of this episode a fight to get your money's worth. I will say I'm a little surprised he took the Parfait fairy, as I really thought that they were building up to her being Amane's equivalent of the energy fairy, but nope, just another victim of the week, along with, I guess, these girls?
I don't
know, because you wanted the surplus of calories?
However, with some good visual storytelling, we were able to see that Amane was unaffected thanks to her soon-to-be transformation trinket, which was then just kinda spelled out for us by Rosemary as though he were the show's narrator. Anyway, to prove that he's legit best bad boy in this show, Narcissist actually learned from his last fight and reinforced his double Baozo with his own energy, kind of like what Gentle did, and made it so that this pot and whisk combo didn't look like it was duct taped together or something. And yeah, he purposely chose two calluses that Gentle had previously used to add a layer of sadism. Though, why just stop at psychological torture? And with Amane literally in hand, it also made for an effective meat shield. The fight as a result, at least for this first part, was just okay, at least by Ito Oka standards, though at least justified because of, again, the hostage, and at least we did get some good faces. It did pick up a little after we got some more emo Amane that again rings a little hollow, especially as everyone tried to fill in the blanks for this character.
Hold on, can we play that again? Is this show doing some good visual storytelling with this villain? Well, at least y'all got your priorities straight.
Yeah, that genuine face of confusion to pure disgust spoke more about Narcissist's personality than anything other people have been saying about Amane throughout this episode, as it actually was coming from the dude himself, and has actually been subtly told throughout this arc, I think. I haven't really brought it up, but yeah, I do think it has been there, and honestly, along with Takumi, who unfortunately isn't in this episode at all, he's a character I'm totally invested in, and not just because he's pretty damn awesome. Hell, he even came up with a pretty effective attack to deal with the cures.
Oh my god, it's Kevin's famous chili. Quick, everyone protect your carpets!
And it was extra spicy, so they did have to come up with a new strategy.
自分を信じてお互いを信じれば道は開くわ
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
And at least it did lead to that good old Itoka Sakuga with some more of their signature multiple angles, as Kokone plugged up the chili with some of her bread, and Ron tied it up. From there, I guess we got the requisite exchange between the lead and 6 rangers of this team.
おばあちゃん言ってた。
人生とはゴールを目指す遠い道。重い荷物を捨て手ぶらで歩いた。
Okay, so I've actually been holding back on this for a while now, as I did want to give the series as fair an opportunity as possible, but now that we are at this point, I think I can just come out and say Yui is a pretty mid-lead.
I mean, she's by no means bad for the most part, but as a result, she also doesn't have that many standout traits, good or bad. Like, what exactly is her personality? Well, she likes to eat a lot, though that's more of a character trait. She really likes sports, though that hasn't been revisited since, like, episode 1. Oh, she's oblivious to the dangers of being a Precure, which really hasn't been revisited since episode 2. Which, yeah, that's another thing. She hasn't really taken that much spotlight throughout these 17 episodes so far.
Though to be fair, it's not entirely the character's fault, and definitely more on the writers for 2 key reasons.
One, there's just too many things that they try to focus on, which, yeah, you wouldn't think would be a problem for a season with only 3, soon to be 4 cures. But there's also Rosemary, the fairy partners, mostly Kome, the product placements, and of course, lots and lots of food prawn for the sake of food prawn. As a result, those aforementioned character traits just never really got any follow-up. And 2, and this is probably even more damning, the grandma said quotes. Yeah, the show has made it no secret that they really want Yui to emulate Soji Tendo, so a good chunk of her limited screen time that she is afforded is spent reciting old lady proverbs, which, yeah, as one of my commenters as well as Yuki put best.
そんなのは自分の言葉じゃない大人ならそれをちゃんと自分の言葉にしてから語ることだ
Hell, it certainly didn't help the character she's trying to emulate.
I mean, yes, I do like putting in all these Kamen Rider Kabuto clips because that show is eternally memeable. But the actual character himself was a bland-ass Gary Stu who was never challenged and was literally handed everything he needed. And while I certainly won't say Yui is a Mary Sue or anything, I do think she's not quite challenged enough, especially when it comes to her morals, which is what you should be building a good protagonist off of.
That sort of drama has elevated her teammates far above her in terms of character arcs, which, yeah, was also kind of the case for Kabuto when the hero in yellow and blue became the real focal point of that series. Now, I'm not saying this character is unsalvageable just yet, but at the very least, I will say she's not in a good position to be even memorably bad, as right now, Yui is the very definition of this clip.
I bring this all up now because I really do feel like it has affected Amane's arc. I mean, while it's not always the case, the 6th and main leads of any Precure or Super Sentai show will often have intertwining plot lines which should be able to elevate both characters. However, even though they seem like they wanted to build towards something like a Tommy and Jason relationship with Amane and Yui, I really don't think it has played out all that well, especially when the latter character hasn't been properly developed, which is a shame because this often can lead to some of the best storylines in these shows. Honestly, I really do want to talk more about the importance of the relationship between the 1st and 6th Rangers of a team, especially when the adjacent Super Sentai of the season has been doing it really well so far, but I think we should save that for maybe its own separate Toy Trinity or duality video in this case, and just get back to this episode.
Anyway, Yui posed a question to the girl she still didn't know much about. What kind of person did she want to become?
みんなを笑顔にできる。
Well, they forced my hand.
When you say, hey, let's get some parfaits, they say, hell no, I don't like no parfaits. Parfaits are delicious.
No!
No!
From there, she managed to release Amane with some help from Rosemary through the power of tickling, because we can't have the effeminate dude just be a badass. And the transformation trinket protected them as Amane flashed back to the reason behind her earlier statement and how she originally met the pompous fairy.
こんな私だが力を貸してくれないか
Well, of course, especially after you spent the show being a villain, then a damsel in distress. Oh, but then you said that you want to be a parfait, yeah.
So, anyway, transformation sequence time, and apparently this was animated by Toru Takano, who did give us some of the better sequences of the final battle of Tropical Rouge, as well as Sango's transformation, so yeah. I mean, I certainly didn't dislike that sequence, but it also was far from my favorite. In fact, I think it was my least favorite of that season, as it just lacked the energy of her teammates, as there were a lot of stops and gaps, which was also the case here. Now, to be fair, it does work a little better here, as nothing in this show is anywhere near as over the top as TRP, and it also allowed them to focus on the elegance of this sugary dessert. Yeah, a little ironic that the one sweet of this team gets the slowest transformation, but I guess parfaits are supposed to be fancy desserts, and at least in Amane's case, she's not eating her partner as she doesn't have one, but rather, a heart.
Like, seriously, what little girl would eat an actual heart? Wait, was Amane a flesh eater this whole time? Oh my god, that would explain so much!
But yeah, it's a fancy transformation, appropriate for the character, but it also does take a little too long at over a minute and 10 seconds compared to everyone else's minute transformations, which yes, does make a difference, especially when her movements are this slow. Anyway, we got Cure.
And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this design. Yeah, big surprise, I'm still being negative about this character.
But I think even if I were a fan, I still wouldn't be all that crazy about this design. I mean, I don't think it's terrible, as there are some interesting choices, like the outer hands of the dress looking like sliced strawberries, and the fact that it's bowl-shaped like a parfait is kind of clever, but geez, these colors. I mean, it's nowhere near as chaotic as the other parfait girl, but conversely, it does feel rather muted, especially in regards to her supposed theme color, purple, which other than the crown and these ball things, there's not a lot of that color that really pops out. Sure, the main dress has some purple, or rather lavender, that's, yeah, kind of hard to see. Like, if you told me that this was white, then I'd honestly probably believe you. Not helped by the fact that there's one big element here that distracts from many of the other colors of this design.
金髪似合わんな
I mean, don't we already have a blonde on this team, so why not pull an Asuka and just slightly lengthen Amane's already dark purple hair, or maybe even do the gentle color again? In fact, I kind of missed that big goofy design, as at least that popped more with colors that weren't being drowned out by all the whitish purple.
If you like this design, then honestly, more power to you. In fact, question of the video, what do you think of this? And don't let my words sway you too much, and just be honest.
Anyway, of course Itooka would save the best animation for the Cure debut, which makes sense and does a good job highlighting her martial arts training. I don't know why Yui had to intervene with her stock animation, but whatever, time for a new finisher. Oh, low frame rate to accommodate flashier animation? Must be you, Yoshiyama. Not complaining, mind you, as I really do like their style, and it does result in a lot of detail, as we can see all of Amane's movements as she swings around her,
That's a pink.
No, that's clearly meant to be an ice cream cone with just that little pink thing at the tip, which is just meant to make it look pretty as it fires a giant white beam out of it. Oh, goddammit.
The unfortunate designs aside, it's still another excellent sequence from Yoshiyama with all of their signature overabundance of impact frames, though thankfully minus the JoJo faces this time. With that, they unfortunately saved the Parfait fairy, and the episode ended with the Precure and the narrator welcoming their newest team member. Oh yeah, almost forgot she was a thing. That counter is starting to get dusty. Though an Amane was added to the ending dance via Skype by the looks of it. Yeah, I don't know, maybe they were supposed to have a new ending theme by the time she debuted and just forced her into this one, Or maybe they're just following the patterns of the openings and all of their shoehorning of the Six Rangers.
So, once again, I'll just say this episode on its own was great, especially in regards to its animation. I mean, it was directed by Ito, for God's sake. How could it not be good?
Granted, I don't think this was their best work, as it did feel a little rough in some areas, but at the same time, I'm legit not expecting anything to top that clubroom scene. However, as the kind of sort of finale to the Amane arc, while it had the right components, I just feel like the foundation wasn't there.
There's still a lot of unanswered questions with this character that without them, I just feel like I can't really get all that invested.
Judging by how forced her appearance in the ending dance was, it could be very possible that Amane's debut was moved up in the episode listings to accommodate the hacking hiatus. So maybe we missed out on some important in-between episodes for this character. Though, even if that were the case, I do think they could have, and really should have, ironed out some of the key details in this arc, like explaining how Amane ended up with the bundles, and how much of that was the result of her own hubris like it was with Toa. But instead, they just decided to double and triple down on garnering some cheap sympathy points wherever they could. They also needed to strengthen her bond with Yui in order for this scene to hold some emotional impact that isn't solely carried by Itoka's great animation. Though that would also require developing Yui's character, which has been heavily sidelined as of late. In general, this arc does feel really incomplete without those elements, which I think I can say as someone who has seen a lot of Six Rangers across both franchises, to the point I could produce another video about it within the next month or so, hint hint. For now though, this arc fell flat for me, which is a shame because this episode was quite well done. As I just said, Ito and their key animators did a lot of the heavy lifting for this episode, not just in getting across some well choreographed action, but also some very emotional expressions that did need some story behind them, but the animators did their job well at least. And of all of the characters in the show, I am actually getting really invested in how they're building Narcissist, as he's the one character who's had some very subtle yet effective visual storytelling through his clear disdain towards the very idea of a Happy Meal. Stuff like that can't hold my interest in a show much more than a rushed arc like this, and while they could certainly course correct with Amane, it's still really frustrating to know that they could have done so much better, especially when it has actually been done better this very season. So overall, on its own, an actually really good conclusion to the Amane arc. I just wish the meal before the dessert was just as good though.
If you haven't seen it yet, we managed to get up the second part of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Openings ranking video just a few days ago, which proved to be some really good timing because when we were just about to render it, we realized we really needed to include this at the beginning. Now, I don't want to be too much of a downer and just say that my condolences all go to Takashi's family and friends, and hopefully this video will be at least a small contribution to his legacy. Still, onwards and upwards, as I always say. And until next time though, farewell for now, my friends, and if you excuse me, I'm gonna go study a slightly better Six Ranger. At least I can actually understand this Skittl's issues.